Hello students, welcome to Learner's Planet. Let's continue with the chapter Diversity in Living Organisms. This is the fifth theory session, and in this session I'm going to explain the different classification systems. Right? Classification, that is the arrangement of organisms into groups or subgroups depending upon their similarities and the dissimilarities. Right, and to classify these organisms, that means arranging the organisms into particular groups. This work was actually not as easy as we are just discussing. Right, it is of course a typical job, and initially it was started by Sir Aristotle. And of course now further finding the different limitations of each, then the new theories, the new systems were proposed out, right? So in this today's session, exactly I'm going to discuss about the same thing, that is the different types of classification system. So the very first classification was proposed by Sir Aristotle, as I already said, and later on there was the two kingdom system, in which all living groups or the all living organisms were classified into two groups, right? And that is known as, each group is known as the kingdom. So we have already discussed earlier that what is meant by this kingdom. It is the topmost taxa, or it is the topmost rank that resembles that is comprised of a maximum number of living organisms which are very much different from each other. Right. Then after that, the next kingdom system proposed was the three kingdom, then four kingdom, and then the five kingdom system, which is now widely accepted. And this is further modified into modern classification system also, and of course it is worldwide accepted. Now let us understand each type or each classification one by one. Aristotle's classification. It was designed by Sir Aristotle, and it is almost a thing which is between 384 to 322 before Christ. So now you can imagine that how old this classification is, and at that time what were the facilities to these great people, on which basis they can work out and they can follow the scientific things, right? So even in those resources, he classified all organisms as plants and animals. Further, these plants were classified on the basis of the size and the animals, and the plants were classified on the basis of their size, and animals were classified on the basis of their habitat. So this is how initially the first classification was done. It was of course a clear fact which was understood till then, that plants are those which are able to synthesize their own food, and animals are those organisms which can obtain their food from the other organisms, either plants or other animals, right? So further, plants on the basis of their size, they were classified as small plants, medium-sized plants, and the large-sized plants. Organisms which are having small size were known as the herbs. Of course, they are known as herbs till now also. Then medium-sized organisms are known as the shrubs, and large-sized plants are the trees. So this was the base for the plants subclassification. Further, animals were classified on the basis of habitat. And what could be the habitat? You know what is habitat? The place where the organism is living. So these organisms can live on land, water, or in the air, right? Basically land is used for walking purpose. Water, over there they show the locomotion by swimming, and in the air they show their locomotion by flying. So this actually is resembling, or it is explaining the important fact about the animals, that they are motile. They are heterotrophic and they are motile, right? But can you think that some important point related to this type of classification? Is it really satisfactory? Is it revealing all the important things or the comparisons which are required for the classification of plants and animals, it is quite complicated. And actually these type of complications were the limitations of Aristotle's classification. See, the Aristotle's classification was basically, let us say, it was based on habitat, right? But if we look around, the same habitat can share the different types of organisms, or in other terms I can say the different types of organisms can share the same habitat. In the same particular region, different types of animals are found. Like, for example, if the habitat is marine, that is the oceans or in the sea water, then we can find out that there are different range of animals. There are varied living forms over there in the single habitat, like fish. There are the mammals, corals, herbs, shrubs, different types of plants, phytoplanktons, microscopic organisms, and so on. And of course, they are very much different from each other. Fish, mammals, they are completely different from each other. Mammals and the corals, a complete distinction is there. There is a very less similarity between these two, isn't it? So, depending or following these type of features, it was said that Aristotle's classification was limited, right, to a very narrow spectrum. It is only related to habitat, so it was not completely accepted. I mean, it is not completely satisfactory. Beside this, if I say there, besides marine habitat, there are the this habitat like terrestrial or the aerial, where different types of organisms are found. So with such type of drawbacks, the new this classification system was proposed, which is known as the two kingdom system. So the next or this two kingdom system, it was proposed by Sir Carolus Linnaeus in 1758. He classified all living organisms on the basis of their mode of nutrition, and thus he was able to classify these organisms into two main categories, that was the plants and the animals. In short, there are two types of nutrition, that is autotrophic and the heterotrophic. So organisms which are autotrophic, they are able to synthesize their own food, and such organisms are coming under the same kingdom, that is known as the plant kingdom. On the other hand, the heterotrophic organisms, that means the organisms which are dependent on other living organisms for their own nourishment. So that is forming a single category, and that is the animals. Fine. Now further, these plants, again, they are of different types. They could be non-flowering plants, or there are the flowering plants. Non-flowering plants, they can be for the unicellular or they can be multicellular. Unicellular like bacteria, of course the cyanobacteria, then the algae, lichens, some fungi, they are coming in this category. Whereas multicellular non-flowering like ferns, liverworts, or mosses, all these are forming the this multicellular category, right? On the other hand, the flowering plants, they are always multicellular. The higher plants are coming in this category. On the other hand, the animals, they can be also classified in the same way, like unicellular and the multicellular. Unicellular, it comprises a group known as protozoa. Multicellular forms of group that is known as metazoa. And further, depending on their further basic features, they are classified as the invertebrates and the vertebrates. Right. So this is how Carolus Linnaeus, he actually divided the all he classified all organisms into two groups. Fine. So now this system was having advantage over the Aristotle's classification. As Aristotle, it was based on let us say habitat, but here it is independent of the habitat. Plants, they can be aquatic or terrestrial, right? Similarly, animals, they can live in water or land, or they can even fly, isn't it? So depending on their more complexity, they are further subclassified. That is on the basis of the number of cells they are made up of, right? Now, despite of such type of advantage, can you think of any limitation in this particular group? Let me just highlight a very small thing here. I have written the unicellular plants, and here I have given you one category, that is fungi. Most of the fungi, they are similar to plants in having a cell wall, but on the other hand they are actually they are having a heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So don't you think it becomes a limitation now, that in these organisms there are the organisms which are having the characteristics of both plants and animals? Besides this, if we compare these unicellular organisms, among them also there is a lot of differences. So further, the next I can explain that explain with the help of some examples, that what are the limitations of this two kingdom system, and therefore why there is a need for the three kingdom system. The important limitation here is that the many unicellular lower forms of organisms, they are having characteristics of both plants and the animals. So now it becomes quite difficult that in which group they have to be placed. For example, Euglena. This Euglena is a unicellular organism and is having the features of both animals and the plants. See, usually animals are motile, right? And plants are non-motile. But this organism is having it is having a flagella, and this flagella helps in the movement of this organism from one place to another. So this is not the characteristic feature of plant, right? That means it should be placed in the animal group. But further, these organisms, they are having the eye spot and the chloroplast. That means they can photosynthesize, right? With the help of this eye spot, it can recognize the direction of light, and with the help of chloroplast, it can synthesize its own food. That means now it is autotrophic. So it is that, and second thing, if it is autotrophic, it has to be placed in the group plant. So don't you think now the confusion has been created? This is the reason that why the new system is to be introduced. There are similar examples for the Chlamydomonas. Again, it is a unicellular algae and is purely autotrophic. You know why I am calling it as a purely autotrophic? Because in the case of Euglena, it can be heterotrophic or it can be autotrophic. See, when the food material is available, it is using that food for its own nutrition. But in the lack of food material, it is synthesizing the food for itself. That means it is both autotrophic as well as heterotrophic. Now, in the case of Chlamydomonas, it is completely autotrophic. It has to synthesize its own food. You can just see this picture, that it is having this large prominent chloroplast here. But unlike plants, it is having the flagella and is able to move from one place to another. So now again, where it should be placed, in which group? Plant kingdom or in the animal kingdom? Further, the other example is fungi. As I already stated that they are having the cell wall like plants, but they lack the chlorophyll. That means they are heterotrophic like the animals. Next thing is these slime molds. It is a type of fungi. They do not have a cell wall. See, presence of cell wall is a typical feature of the plant cell. Now, in this case, the fungi is always having the cell wall. But if we are discussing about this slime molds, then they do not have a cell wall in the vegetative phase. And when they are in the reproductive phase, they are having the cell wall like any other fungi. So now here in its through this cycle, you can observe that they are having the features of both the groups. They are heterotrophic and they are lacking the cell wall. That means they should be placed in the animal group. But in the later half or the later phase of its life cycle, it is having the cell wall. So now it should be placed in the plant group. So this is how the confusions were created because of such type of unique features present in these lower organisms. And thus there was no clear distinction between the lower plants and animals, and hence there was a need to revise the two kingdom system. And this is the reason that why the three kingdom system was proposed. So this three kingdom system, it was proposed by Sir Ernst Haeckel in 1860s. And according to this three kingdom system, he actually raised a third kingdom which is known as the Protista. He actually separated all unicellular organisms from animal and the plant kingdom, and he just placed them in a single group or the single kingdom which is known as the Protista. So according to three kingdom system, there is a first kingdom, that is Protista, which is comprised of all unicellular organisms. Then there is a plant kingdom, which is comprised of all multicellular autotrophic organisms. The third kingdom is the animal kingdom, in which there are only multicellular heterotrophic organisms. So now this is how you can understand how he just designed this third kingdom. Well, later the fourth kingdom was introduced, that was the Monera. See, there were, after knowing studying a lot about the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell, it was found that the Protista, which is comprised of all unicellular organisms, is having the diverse living forms over there. There are the organisms in which a well-developed nucleus is present. On the other hand, there were the organisms in which the well-developed nucleus was absent. Right? In simple terms, a prokaryotic cell with a primitive nucleus and the eukaryotic cell with the developed nucleus, both type of organisms were present in the group Protista. So later it was separated, all unicellular prokaryotic organisms, they were separated out from Protista, and they constituted a single kingdom known as the Monera. And of course Protista, it comprised of all the unicellular eukaryotic organisms. The other two kingdoms were plants and animals as such, and further finally the fifth kingdom was introduced, and that was the group or the kingdom Fungi. Fungi is a group of organisms which is having the characteristic features like they are multicellular, and at some stages they are also unicellular. Besides, they all are eukaryotic, and they are having the cell wall, and they all are heterotrophic. So from these properties you can say that in which group they must be placed, because they are having the characteristic features of all these three groups: Protista, plant and animals. And because of such type of complications, the separate kingdom was introduced, which is known as Fungi. So this is how the five kingdom system was laid down and was widely accepted. You know who proposed this five kingdom system? Let me tell you. It was proposed by Sir Robert Whittaker in 1959, and this five kingdom system actually became the base for the modern classification system. This system, that is the five kingdom system, was based on this on the following criteria, that is the prokaryotic cell versus eukaryotic cells. Second was unicellular organisms versus the multicellular organisms, or the second criteria was basically the body organization. And third criteria is the mode of nutrition. One more additional point which was introduced here, or which was set as a criteria, was the presence and the absence of the cell wall. So let me show you one flowchart so as to explain all these classification and the subclassification. So here is the flowchart. R.H. Whittaker, he classified all organisms as the prokaryotic and the eukaryotic organisms. This was the first base for the classification of living organisms as used by Sir Whittaker. Fine. I'm sorry, all prokaryotic organisms were placed in the kingdom Monera. Fine. So this is the first kingdom here. Then all eukaryotic organisms, they are further subclassified. The eukaryotic organisms, they can be unicellular or multicellular. So all unicellular organisms, they constituted a single kingdom that is known as the kingdom Protista. Further, all multicellular organisms, they were further classified on the basis of the presence of cell wall and the absence of the cell wall. Not only this much, they were subclassified on the basis of their body organization later. So if the cell wall is absent, then all these organisms were placed in the kingdom that is Animalia. Fine. And if the cell wall is present, then the next thing to be considered is that whether these cell wall containing organisms are autotrophic or they are heterotrophic. So if these are autotrophic, they are placed in the group or kingdom plant or the Plantae, and if they are heterotrophic with cell wall, then they all must be they must constitute the kingdom Fungi. Of course, the kingdom Animal, they are having the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So now you can see that how these organisms, they were classified into 5 kingdoms. What are the 5 kingdoms? Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and the Animalia. Later on, in 1977, Sir Carl Woese, he subclassified the kingdom Monera into Eubacteria and Archaebacteria. This class, basically Monera is comprised of all unicellular prokaryotic organisms. And you know which type of organisms are having these properties? It is the group Bacteria. All bacteria are prokaryotic and they are having, they all are unicellular. They are made up of single cell. Now further, depending upon whether they are living in the moderate conditions or they are living in the extreme conditions, they were subclassified by Carl Woese, that in the Eubacteria and the Archaebacteria group. So this is all about the different types of kingdom systems or the classification of organisms. Later I'm going to explain the features of all these kingdoms and their classes or the subclassification. And that I'm going to continue in the next session. So till then, thank you so much. Have a nice day. Goodbye.